You've been searching for something that's already gone. You wake up one morning and reach for that old version of yourself, the one who laughed easily at jokes you can no longer find funny, the one who slipped into conversations without thinking, who moved through the world with a certain lightness you can't seem to remember how to access anymore. You try to force it back. You put yourself in the same situations, around the same people, doing the same things that once brought you joy, and you wait. You wait for that familiar feeling to return, for your old personality to click back into place like a key turning in a lock, but it doesn't come. And the longer you wait, the more you realize something terrifying. It's not coming back. It can't come back, and deep down in a place you're afraid to look, you know this. You know that whoever you were before your awakening died the moment you saw through the illusion. And no amount of wishing, no amount of effort, no amount of desperate grasping can resurrect what has already dissolved. If you're watching this, subscribe to Alan Watts Insights, because we explore the truths that most spiritual content refuses to touch. The uncomfortable, the grief-filled, the irreversible transformations that change everything. Let me paint you a picture of what this feels like. You're at a gathering, maybe with old friends, maybe with family, people who knew you before. They're laughing about something, telling stories, and you're sitting there watching it all happen, as if through glass. You can see them, you can hear them, but you can't reach them anymore. Someone says something meant to be funny, something that would have made the old you double over with laughter, and you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel a kind of distant sadness, because you remember that you used to find this funny, but you can't access why. The reference points are gone. The person who understood that joke, who lived in that frequency, who related to the world in that way, that person doesn't exist anymore. And so you try. You force a smile. You manufacture a laugh. You reach deep into your memory for how you used to be in moments like this. And you perform it. You perform your old personality like an actor playing a role they've studied but can't quite inhabit. And everyone notices. They might not say it directly, but you can see it in their eyes. You've changed, you're different, you're not fun anymore, you're too serious, too deep, too distant. And the worst part is, they're right, you are different. And you can't explain to them that it's not a choice, that you didn't decide to become this way, that something fundamental shifted inside you, and now the person they're looking for is gone. Here's what's happening, and this is where most people misunderstand the nature of spiritual awakening entirely. They think awakening is an experience, a peak state, a temporary glimpse into higher consciousness that you can dip into and then return from, like going on a trip and coming home. But that's not what awakening is. Awakening is a death. It is the literal dissolution of the psychological structure you spent your entire life building and believing was you. The personality you're mourning, the one you so desperately want back, was never a fixed thing. It was a constellation of learned behaviors, conditioned responses, social masks, defense mechanisms, and survival strategies that your nervous system assembled over decades to help you navigate a world it perceived as threatening. That personality was built on a fundamental misunderstanding, a core illusion that you were a separate self, an isolated entity in a bag of skin, fundamentally disconnected from everything around you. Every joke you laughed at, every interest you pursued, every social dynamic you engaged in, all of it was filtered through this lens of separation, this belief in a small, vulnerable self that needed to be protected, validated, entertained, and kept comfortable. When awakening happens, that lens shatters. And once you've seen through it, once you've experienced even a moment of consciousness without that filter, you cannot put it back. This isn't metaphorical. Neuroscience has shown us that awakening experiences create permanent alterations in the brain's self-referential networks. The default mode network, the part of your brain responsible for constructing and maintaining your sense of a separate self, undergoes structural changes. Studies show increased cortical thickness, altered connectivity patterns, reduced activity in regions associated with ego identification. Your brain has literally reorganized itself. The neural pathways that supported your old personality, the automatic patterns of thought and behavior that felt so natural, those pathways have been disrupted, and in many cases, they've been replaced with entirely new circuitry. You cannot think your way back into your old personality because the hardware that ran that software has been fundamentally altered. It would be like trying to run a program on a computer after the operating system has been upgraded. The old program simply won't execute anymore. And here's what nobody tells you about this process. The grief you're feeling is real. It's not a sign that something went wrong. It's not evidence that you're doing awakening incorrectly. It's not weakness or attachment or spiritual failure. You are mourning a death. The person you were, the personality you identified with for years, maybe decades, that person is gone. And even those spiritual teachings will tell you that person was never real to begin with, that it was an illusion, a construction, a mask, that doesn't make the grief any less legitimate. Because to you, it was real. You lived through that personality. You experienced the world through its eyes. You made memories, formed relationships, built a life around the way that person moved through the world. And now that person is gone, and you're left in this strange liminal space, not yet fully embodied in whatever is emerging, but no longer able to inhabit what was. Let me tell you what Alan Watts understood about this that most people miss. Watts said the ego is a social institution with no physical reality. It's simply your symbol of yourself, a convenient fiction you created to navigate social reality. But here's the key: once you see it as a symbol, once you recognize it as a construction rather than a fundamental truth, you can never unsee that. It's like watching a magic trick and then having the magician show you how it's done. The illusion is broken. You can watch the trick again, you can go through the motions, but the magic is gone because you know how it works. Your old personality was that magic trick. It felt real. It felt like you. But awakening showed you the mechanism behind it, the beliefs and fears and needs that were animating it. And now you can't believe in it anymore. You can't re-inhabit it with the same unconscious ease because consciousness has entered the equation. And consciousness, once introduced, cannot be removed. Now, let me be clear about something crucial here. The people in your life who haven't gone through this transformation cannot understand what you're experiencing. They're still living in the magic trick. They're still identified with their personality as self, still operating from the assumption that they are the voice in their head, the collection of preferences and opinions and reactions that make up their sense of identity. When they look at you and say you've changed, what they're really saying is you're no longer playing the game the way you used to. You're no longer reinforcing their reality. Your presence, your energy, the way you move through the world now, it creates discomfort in them because it reminds them, unconsciously, that there's something beyond the personality, something deeper, something that doesn't need the constant validation and stimulation and distraction that their ego requires. So they pull away, or they try to pull you back. They tell you to lighten up, to not be so serious, to just relax and be yourself. And what they don't understand is that you are being yourself, perhaps for the first time. It's just that this self doesn't match the projection they had of who you were. This is where the isolation becomes almost unbearable, because you're not just grieving the loss of your old personality, you're also grieving the loss of connection with people who can only relate to you through that old personality. The friendships that were built on shared interests, those interests no longer resonate. The humor that bonded you to certain people, that humor now feels hollow, like laughing at something that isn't actually funny, but everyone's pretending it is. The conversations about trivial things, gossip, complaints, surface-level observations about life, you can't engage with them anymore because your awareness has shifted to a different frequency. It's not that you think you're better than these people. It's not spiritual arrogance or superiority. It's that your consciousness is quite literally perceiving reality differently now, And trying to go back to those old patterns of relating feels like forcing yourself to speak a language you've forgotten. Buddhism has a teaching that addresses this directly, the doctrine of anatta, or no self. It says that what we call the self is not a fixed, unchanging entity, but a constantly shifting process, a temporary aggregation of physical and mental phenomena. The personality you think you lost was never a solid thing to begin with. It was always changing, always in flux, always dependent on conditions and circumstances. But you didn't see that when you were identified with it. You thought it was you, permanent and essential. Awakening revealed the truth, that there is no fixed self to return to, because there never was a fixed self in the first place. What you're really mourning is the illusion of permanence, the comfort of believing you were a solid, knowable entity rather than a flowing, ever-changing process. And here's the profound part. Once you see this, once you recognize the impermanence and constructed nature of what you thought was you, you cannot unsee it. This is why you can't get your old personality back. Not because it was destroyed, but because it was never there the way you thought it was. The Taoist concept of Wu Wei helps us understand what replaces the old personality. Wu Wei means effortless action, acting in alignment with the natural flow of life rather than forcing things from the place of ego and control. Your old personality was built on effort, on trying, on maintaining an image, on controlling how others perceived you, on managing your internal state to fit external expectations. It was exhausting even when it felt normal, because it required constant vigilance. You had to monitor yourself, adjust yourself, perform yourself in every interaction. Awakening dissolved that structure, and now you're learning to move from a different place. From presence rather than personality, from being rather than becoming. And this new way of moving through the world doesn't have the same flavor as the old one. It's quieter, more spacious, less reactive. It can feel like you've lost your spark, your vitality, your essence. But what you've actually lost is the constant friction of trying to be someone. And that friction, that effort, that's what you're mistaking for aliveness. Here's the thing most spiritual teachings won't tell you clearly enough. The integration period after awakening can last years. This isn't something you fix quickly. This isn't a phase you push through and then return to normal. There is no returning to normal because normal was the illusion. What's happening now is a complete restructuring of your identity, a rebuilding of your sense of self from the ground up. But this time conscious rather than unconscious, chosen rather than conditioned. And during this restructuring, you will feel lost. You will feel like you don't know who you are anymore. You will reach for old patterns and find they no longer work. You will try to connect with people the old way and hit a wall. You will mourn and grieve and rage against this transformation because part of you still believes there's a way back. But there isn't. And at some point, you have to stop fighting that truth and allow yourself to be in the not knowing, in the in-between, in the death before the rebirth. Let me take you deeper into why this is so disorienting. Your old personality wasn't just a set of behaviors. It was an entire worldview, a way of organizing reality that made sense of your experience. It told you who you were, what mattered, what was important, what was dangerous, what was good, what was bad. It was a complete operating system for navigating life. When that dissolves, you lose your reference points. Things that used to seem obviously important, career advancement, social status, accumulating possessions, maintaining appearances, suddenly feel arbitrary and meaningless. But you don't yet have a new framework to replace the old one. You're in the void, the space between stories. And the void is terrifying because it offers no solid ground, no clear direction, no familiar landmarks. You have to learn to tolerate this groundlessness to function without the certainty your old personality provided. And most people cannot do this. Most people, when they hit this space, panic and try desperately to reconstruct something familiar, even if it's just a pale imitation of who they were. But you can't reconstruct what has been deconstructed. You can only wait, be patient, be gentle with yourself, and trust that something new will emerge, not from effort but from allowing. What's emerging, though you may not be able to see it clearly yet, is not a new personality in the same sense as the old one. It's a different way of being entirely. The old personality was a defense, a strategy, a means of securing safety and belonging in a world perceived as hostile and separate. What's emerging now is presence, the capacity to be with what is without needing to control it, change it, or make it into something else. It's responsiveness rather than reactivity. It's openness rather than defense. It's flow rather than force. And yes, from the outside, this can look like you've become passive, withdrawn, less dynamic. But that's only because our culture mistakes ego-driven striving for vitality. Real vitality comes from alignment with what is, from moving with life rather than against it. And that kind of vitality doesn't announce itself the way ego vitality does. It's quiet, subtle, easily missed if you're looking for fireworks. This is where most people get it wrong when they talk about spiritual awakening. They present it as this beautiful, blissful transformation where you become more loving, more peaceful, more connected. And yes, those qualities do emerge, but not in the way you think. Not as a personality trait you add to your collection, but as a natural expression of what remains when the personality dissolves. The love isn't something you do. It's what you are when you stop being the small, defended self. The peace isn't something you achieve. It's what's left when the conflict between who you think you should be and who you are ends. The connection isn't something you create. It's what you realize was always there once the illusion of separation collapses. But to get to that, you have to endure this death. You have to let the old personality go, not because you're strong or evolved or spiritually advanced, but because you literally have no other choice. It's already gone. You're just clinging to the memory of it. Alan Watts had a beautiful way of describing this. He said nothing is more creative than death, since it is the whole secret of life. It means that the past must be abandoned, that the unknown cannot be avoided. What you're going through isn't failure. It's creation. It's the most profound creative act there is, the birth of a new way of being that isn't based on past conditioning but on present awareness. But creation requires destruction first. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by adding wings to its caterpillar body. It dissolves completely in the cocoon. Its entire structure liquefies, and only then, from that liquid chaos, does the butterfly form emerge. You are in the cocoon right now. You are in the dissolution phase, and it feels like death because it is death. But it's also the only way to what comes next. So what do you do with this? How do you live in this space of having lost your old personality and not yet having fully embodied whatever is emerging? First, you stop pretending. You stop forcing yourself to be social in ways that don't feel authentic anymore. You stop performing your old personality for people who can't see who you're becoming. You give yourself permission to be awkward, to be quiet, to withdraw when you need to say no to invitations that feel like obligations. You honor the grief. You let yourself cry for who you were. You let yourself miss the ease and the lightness and the simplicity of moving through the world unconsciously. You don't bypass this with spiritual platitudes about how it was all an illusion anyway. Yes, it was an illusion, but it was your illusion, and its loss deserves to be mourned. Second, you become fiercely protective of your inner space. This is not the time to seek validation from people who knew the old you. They cannot give you what you need because what you need isn't recognition or approval but space to become. You need time alone. You need silence. You need to not have to explain yourself or justify your transformation or defend your withdrawal from social dynamics that no longer serve you. This will feel selfish. It will feel like you're abandoning people, letting them down, becoming someone they can't relate to. And in a sense, you are. But this is necessary. This is the only way through. Third, you cultivate patience with the process. You accept that this isn't a quick fix. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly feel like yourself again, because there is no self to go back to. You're going to be in this liminal space for as long as it takes. And trying to rush it or force it, or make it happen faster, will only create more suffering. You learn to be comfortable with not knowing, with not having a clear sense of identity, with being in the question of who am I now rather than demanding an answer. This is radical work, and it goes against everything your conditioning tells you about how to be in the world. But it's the only path that doesn't lead back to the illusion. And fourth, you trust. Not trust in some external force or divine plan, but trust in the intelligence of the process itself. Your consciousness expanded. It showed you something true about the nature of reality and the constructed nature of the self. That expansion happened for a reason, even if the reason isn't clear yet. The old personality had to die because it was built on a false foundation, and anything built on a false foundation eventually collapses. What's being built now, slowly, almost imperceptibly, is a way of being that's rooted in truth rather than illusion. And that takes time, it takes patience, it takes faith in what you cannot yet see. Let me tell you what's possible on the other side of this death. Not to give you false hope, or to make you think there's some destination you're traveling toward, but to help you understand that this dissolution is not the end. You will find a new way of being in the world, not a return to who you were, but an emergence of something that was always there beneath the personality, obscured by it. You will find that you can laugh again, but the laughter comes from a deeper place, not from ego identification, but from genuine delight in the absurdity and beauty of existence. You will find that you can connect with people again, but the connections will be real, based on presence rather than performance, on authentic meeting rather than social transaction. You will find interests and passions again, but they won't be driven by the need to fill emptiness or distract from discomfort. They'll arise naturally from your being, from what wants to express itself through you. This new way of being won't feel like the old personality, because it's not a personality at all in the same sense. It's more fluid, more responsive, less fixed. You'll notice you can be different in different contexts, without feeling like you're being fake. You'll notice you don't need to maintain a consistent image of yourself anymore, because you're not trying to convince anyone, including yourself, that you're a particular kind of person. You'll find freedom in this, even though right now it might feel like chaos. You'll discover that not being anyone specific allows you to be everything, to meet each moment fresh without the burden of having to be consistent with who you were yesterday. But I need to be honest with you about something. Some of the relationships in your life won't survive this transformation. Some friendships will fall away. Some family connections will become distant. Some people will decide they can't relate to you anymore, and they'll move on, and you have to let them. This isn't cruelty. This isn't spiritual bypassing where you just disconnect from everyone because they're not awakened. This is recognizing that relationships built on the old personality cannot transfer to the new reality because they were never based on your true being. They were based on roles, on projections, on mutual agreements to maintain certain illusions. When you stop playing your role, the relationship has nothing left to stand on, and that's okay. It's painful, but it's okay. Because what's possible now are relationships of a completely different quality, ones based on truth, on presence, on the recognition of consciousness meeting consciousness, rather than personality meeting personality. And this changes everything. When you stop trying to get your old personality back, when you finally surrender to the irreversibility of this transformation, when you accept that you can never return to the unconscious innocence of who you were before awakening, something profound happens. The struggle ends. The resistance dissolves. And in that dissolution, you discover that what you thought was a loss of self was actually a liberation from a prison you didn't even know you were in. The old personality felt like you, but it was really just a collection of fears and defenses and strategies for survival. What remains when it's gone is not nothing. It's everything. It's the awareness that was always there beneath the personality, witnessing it, animating it, but never bound by it. You are that awareness. You always were. The personality was just a costume you wore for so long you forgot you were wearing it. And now that the costume has fallen away, you're discovering what you look like without it. And it's both terrifying and beautiful because it's infinite, undefined, unlimited by the small story you used to tell about who you were. So no, you can't get your old personality back. And if you're honest with yourself, if you drop beneath the grief and the fear and the desperate grasping, you'll find that you don't actually want it back. What you want is the comfort it provided, the certainty, the sense of knowing who you were and how to be in the world. But that comfort came at a cost. It cost you your freedom. It cost you your aliveness. It cost you the capacity to be present with reality as it is rather than as your conditioned mind told you it should be. The old you was safe, predictable, controllable, but it was also small, limited, defined by boundaries that were never real. What you're becoming has no such boundaries. And yes, that's terrifying, but it's also the only thing worth living for. So trust the process, trust the death, trust that what's dying needed to die, and what's emerging is worth the temporary chaos of not knowing. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are in the most profound transformation a human being can undergo. The death of the false self and the birth of your true nature. And that process, as painful as it is the greatest gift awakening can offer. Because on the other side of this death is a life you cannot even imagine yet. One that's not bound by who you think you should be, but free to express what you actually are. And that freedom, that aliveness, that presence, it's worth every moment of grief, every loss, every ending. Because it's the only thing that's real. And you, beneath all the personality, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the stories you told yourself about who you were, you are real too. And you always have been. Welcome home.